When I used to think or talk to people about Stonewall a few years ago, people had nothing but positive things to say about it. Certainly when I was at school, it was quite a keystone for gay rights and for advancing the cause for equality. What went wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think for many years they've been trading on their reputation as, an organisation that did good. And to be fair, when they were set up in 1989, they did. They campaigned against Section 28 and made some real gains. But essentially, they were so successful. They're now an organisation in search of a cause, if you like. So they, in 2013, when same-sex marriage was granted, they did themselves out of a purpose. So they sort of started looking around under Ruth Hunt. They accepted a large donation to incorporate trans-specific work, and have done so ever since. And as part of that, I mean, this year it's been quite extraordinary. We've seen the current CEO, Nancy Kelly, refer to lesbians as sexual racists if they won't consider relationships with trans women, many of whom, do nothing to so-called transition. We've seen her describe people like me with gender-critical beliefs. That is to say, I believe, as I think do most people, that sex cannot be changed and that sex matters. Your biological sex cannot be changed. She describes that as akin to anti-Semitism. So we've got it's unsurprising, really, that that for many years Stonewall tried to not debate these issues, to say there was no contradiction between the LGB and the T, but there is. Because if you say that trans women are women and trans men are men, then you have to open the door to the idea of lesbians with penises, which is clearly bloody ridiculous. But that is why they've tried so hard to suppress the debate, and why, now that this is all coming out, the wheels are really coming off.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because Stonewall, as you were just saying, I mean, they were involved in some of the great steps forward, the equalisation of age of consent and the Section 28 being repealed and this kind of thing. And as you said, of course, equal marriage and all of these things are quite important. But so many gay people and lesbians are suggesting now that Stonewall doesn't represent them at all. Is this, does there need to be a conflict between the LGB and the T? Is there a way that that could be reconciled, in your view?
To be honest, I don't think so. I mean, we've seen one of the good things about this is there's been a real flowering of new groups for people who are same-sex attracted, who feel they have very different needs from those who identify as transgender. So we've seen, for example, the Lesbian Rights Alliance. They've been going for a very long time. Lesbian Fight Back. There's a new gay men's group, and of course, there's the LGB Alliance, who were set up a few years ago. So we've seen a real sort of flowering of lesbian, gay and bisexual culture, which is great and sort of genuinely grassroots. And there's a certain irony at the time that Stonewall have sort of, you see rainbows everywhere, you see big corporations pretending that there's still a lot of work to be done, whereas, to be honest, there isn't that much anymore. Legally, we've won the battles. So it's kind of interesting that now, when there's very little controversy, you get organisations jumping all over and covering themselves in pride flags.
Easy, isn't it? I mean, it would have been quite interesting had corporations been flying that flag before the age of consent was equalised, or before Section 28 was repealed. That would have been impressive. But, now that it's an establishment position, it doesn't strike me as particularly impressive. But this is a very interesting point that you raise. You raise these groups that are there to advocate for people who are same-sex attracted. And I know, of course, that Stonewall on their website and their resources has redefined homosexuality to mean same-gender attracted. But, of course, fundamentally, one of the aspects of gay rights and the fight and the struggle for gay equality has been a recognition that it is to do with biological sex. And that's been quite fundamental. So you can see how and why people are turning against them. But why is it that whenever people raise this with Stonewall, I mean, I've invited them on my programme a number of times, they just, they stonewall me, they absolutely say no. But why is it that whenever someone raises these legitimate concerns, they always claim it's transphobia, it's hate, it's all of these things? I've spoken to many gender-critical feminists. I've yet to speak to one who hates trans people, and yet that is the go-to accusation. Why is that?
Oh, it's a very effective way to silence people. And of course, they've wanted to silence people because their position does not hold. I mean, it is just logically inconsistent. You cannot be born into the wrong body. You can suffer from gender dysphoria, and you can feel compassion for those who do. But that doesn't mean you can literally change sex. So I think any sort of interrogation of that huge leap of logic has to be shut down quickly, because obviously that's what their funding depends on. And it's interesting, they've now developed a whole glossary of additional terms like abrosexual, allosexual, grey sexual, demisexual, to try and sort of expand the remit of what they do. Essentially, they're nonsense terms that they're just sort of trying to sort of expand their market, if you like, because they've realised there's not a lot more that can be done for LGBT people. Ironically, last week, Nancy Kelly was on with Christine Burns talking about transgender politics and sort of supposedly transphobia in the British media. So I'm not surprised she wouldn't appear with you. And she was complaining about the BBC, who obviously ditched their ties to Stonewall. And something I thought was quite amusing about that was she chose to appear on Al Jazeera. Now, I think entirely fair enough for her to choose to express her views on whatever outlet she wishes to do so. But it does seem kind of ironic that the head of a lesbian, gay, bisexual, and apparently transgender rights organisation would appear on Al Jazeera, which is obviously part funded by the Qatari government, where, you know, they don't have that many pride marches, funnily enough, whilst complaining about the bigotry of the BBC. Just absolutely bonkers. So it's not surprising that they've wanted to suppress criticism and suppress investigation and to sort of smear any opponents as bigoted. And I think the result of that is that when she does go on television, she can't make her case.
How effective do you think these smear campaigns have been? I mean, I've seen very sort of prominent commentators as well, just casually referring to the LGB Alliance as a hate group. There's no evidence whatsoever for that, but they just repeat it to the extent that I suppose they just assume if they repeat it often enough, it will stick. Do you think, however, that the public mood is turning against this and that people are waking up to what the problem is? I mean, maybe is it the case that the reason why Stonewall was able to infiltrate so many institutions and have so much clout within those institutions is that people didn't really know what it was they were pushing for?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've traded on their past reputation, and I think, you know, organisations know they're supposed to make the right noises about equality, and they're quite happy to just outsource the thinking and make it an HR thing and not really consider it in any depth. And, you know, for a long time, Stonewall were the experts and were supposedly the voice of the community. They haven't been for a very long time now, but obviously it's taking a while for that to filter through to public awareness.